We're going to be carrying on from where we finished off last session, which is the general principles of tendinopathy or persistent limb pain presentations. And again, I've got videos that I'd like to share today, which are going to be some of them with a little bit of music in, but hopefully you'll be able to hear and see them. Make notes and jot stuff down, because again, I'm building you and exposing you towards stuff that is going to be impossible for me to put everything onto Blackboard, and also not realistic because it's the amount of work that I've put into it. But the Panopto and the videos in here will be on Blackboard. And it's an interesting thing that I just wanted to just raise here now. You know, I've just been speaking with various different groups of people who are in different universities or different chiropractic colleges around the world, and the debate around what we are teaching as to you guys as students. And it does make me pleased, even though I appreciate some of you guys might get a little bit frustrated with not having definitive answers all the time, but the things that you've been exposed to, I can only speak for what you've been exposed to through myself. I really do hope that you will look back on it, if you don't fully appreciate it now, in a year, in 2 years, when you look back on and you speak to other people in different colleges about what they went through regarding exercise prescription. It's something that I'm going to be speaking about on the Royal College of Chiropractic on Wednesday to illustrate the things that we're trying to expose you guys to. So there's going to be some videos in here today, and I'm going to try and share those, because now we're starting to move towards what we actually do with rehabilitation. And that's again how I'm going to try and go about that, is to share my Google Slides presentation. If there's problems with sound, or for whatever reason it doesn't come up on the screen, please bang it in the box, because I will be looking at the other tab, not looking in this room here. Deal?
Uppers.
Cool. Right, so let me just check. Yeah. Tendinopathy. Cool. Right. So we went through all of the grounding principles last week, and we worked through the idea around sensitivity in musculoskeletal presentations, as in the limbs. How do we test that? How do we then implement that with some general exercise prescription, descending inhibition, tissue damage and pain not being one of the same, issue with scans and pain, and these seem to be the same, also hold true with the ankle, with the knee, with the shoulders, much like they do in the back. And the idea that we need to be able to work towards and work with acceptable pain. Can't be going into a loading program and thinking that pain is a measure of tissue damage. So that then brings us up to step one, which is where the first test, and again, I'm talking general here now. After this, we're going to be going into ankle, knee, shoulder in a more specific context for those joints, but this is going to be general. So the first test, or step one, is going to be load tolerance testing the pain. And to do that, I'm going to remind you that we had there was two main factors that needs to be on the tip of your tongue when navigating all of the fluff around what a patient's going to come to present to you with. There's two main factors with a tendinopathy that are going to be provocative. Can anyone remember what those two things are? I tried to really hit that home last lecture. Two main things that are not in and of themselves a problem, but once you've exceeded your capacity, what are the two main factors that are going to be provocative that you're going to need to be looking for in your in taking that out of somebody's daily life, training, whatever. Two things. Anything that you guys can remember, the two main things that you're going to be wanting to know are going to be provocative, whether it's an ankle, whether it's a knee, whether it's a shoulder. Load and frequency. Yeah, specific types of loading that were going to be really provocative. And again, if we can't remember it, I'm going to take you back there because it's super important. This slide here. Compression of the tendon, what movements compress that tendon, and high and fast load. Not just heavy load isn't a problem, heavy load done in a very short period of time, the plyometric rebound stuff. Those are the two things that are going to be provocative, that you're going to be needed to have a way of incrementally testing how much they can tolerate of compression and of high and fast load. So that is going to form a battery of tests that you would have for the ankle, for the Achilles, for the patella, for the hamstring, for the shoulder, for the elbows, and they're going to be what we're going to be going through in the individual tests. With the third years this year, I took the practical lab was actually going through all those load tolerance testing. So you guys are going to have this more in lecture format here, because we need to know what is their tolerance to compression and to high and fast load. Okay, I'm going to play a video here to illustrate how we might do this at the shoulder. We've got a whole session on the shoulder to come. Is this going to play? I'm in the scapular plane, so in this range here, thumb up, just all the way overhead. Tell me if you have any symptoms through there. And back down.
Weakness from here
Feels weak.
down there until there, yeah.
Okay, and if you do the same thing coming forward into flexion. So you're able to get overhead. Is there a point that symptoms come on or not?
Not so much. Yeah, a little bit up there, right at the top.
Okay. I'm going to take you into a position, hand across your chest here now. So this is going to be, all I want to know here is does this hurt or not? So I'm going to place my hand here, rest your arm on my arm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I don't even need to press it there, that's reproducing it.
Yeah.
And back down. Okay. I'm going to do a couple of resisted tests we talked about before. So I'm just going to lock you in here. You're going to slowly rotate hand out towards me as far as you can. So that's going to be the movement. And back in. So I'm going to now build the resistance. Beat me.
Yeah, a little bit right towards the end.
A little bit, but that's pretty strong. We do the same thing here. I give you a short point there. Again, go into external rotation, see if you can. So it's going to be that movement. Is that a little bit painful there already? Yeah. But then if we give a bit of resistance,
Yeah, painful.
yeah, pull that on straight away. Okay, one final one. Stabilize the shoulder with my hand here. I'm just going to bring you forward. You tell me if there's any pain or at what point it comes on.
No, not.
It's okay as long as it's passive.
Yeah.
You do it active on your own now.
Weak.
There.
Yeah.
So we've got a point there, and that angle's not going to be our reference point for retesting to try and calm that down. So when we get to looking at the shoulder, we're going to be then the way that the provocative movements of the shoulder are going to be, and they were at the start of this session, they're going to be elevation, so whether that's at the front or at the side, and abduction, and resisted external rotation. They're going to be the provocative movements. So the orthopedic testing for compression are going to be symptom provocation and finding the point at which that movement brings on symptoms. Equally, then we can do the same thing with external rotation by side and on at 90 degrees of abduction to be able to get a reference point and then a reporting of pain for what is their highest level of pain with which test. And then we load manage that for a period of time to be able to get that down to acceptable pain. In the shoulder, that's orthopedic tests are going to be our compression tests. In the lower limb, we're going to have a battery of tests testing compression, so changing the range of movement, and then changing the speed. Okay, so with the Achilles, for example, there will be a series of calf raise tests, and then if someone passes those, they would go on to high and fast load, which would be incrementally increasing hopping. Okay, so this would be a slow and deep maximal hop, and the phone on the floor. So that's an example there of a slow and deep hop, which is a progression on from short and narrow submaximal hops that we're going to get to be able to see if that reproduces some symptoms. Again, looking at then coming back to, is it acceptable pain? What's the report in there and then? But then also, what is it 24 hours, 48 hours afterwards? What is the pain response? Okay, so we need to be able to work up through a battery of tests to find what someone is able to tolerate. We've got that for each tendon and for each joint through it. And then we need to be able to get that reporting of pain for, once you found their tolerance, we don't go on to more provocative tests. That is their, we find what the low tolerance is. Then we need to be able to get a pain response, and then a couple of days later as well, or 24 or 48 hour load response. And how are we going to get that? We're going to have a recall from the person who's in rehab, where either they're going to have to report it or they're going to have to write it down. And that's really what this, just bring that out there. This slide here really summarizes what load management is all about over time, because this is where we would find someone's highest level of load tolerance. And for example, it could be hopping. So hopping gives an 8 out of 10 pain in the Achilles or in the patella. And then we need to be able to say, well, they're not able to, that's not acceptable pain for them at the moment. We need to step down the stretch, shorten, and cycle ladder to find what they are able to tolerate. And that's where we come down to be able to then find the point that they do have acceptable pain. So we go down, so we reduce high and fast load, or maybe we reduce range of movement to stop compression, so that we can get a test that comes under acceptable pain. And at this point then, we are able to gradually reload them, which is what the dotted line here illustrates, back up slowly over time to that load, which was led to them coming to us for help, because it was at that point exceeding their capacity. And this line, or this jagged line here, illustrates the fact that pain, so this is pain, can flare, it can come up and it can come down, and that is really normal. We need to be able to be shifting towards getting people plotting and being able to see their functional progress over time, which is where we want to be able to see they're either getting stronger, or they're able to increase range of movement. They're able to, when we're able to see that the function is able to continue going up, but pain can flare, come up and down. We can even have periods like this flat line here, which illustrate a flare for, an extended period beyond 48 hours. But if we can still then be able to manage that and make that, you know, as part of the normal expected part of the journey. It is the reality of what tendon rehab is going to be like. Little flares, but the function should be going up over the duration of rehabilitation. And this is an example of being able to see and plot what the load and response might look like. I've just pulled out an example from my own patella tendon loading to illustrate that you will need to have a way of your patient being able to, or your client, the person you're helping, being able to record their load management. Okay, so this is an Excel spreadsheet. I've done many ways over the years. I've done it over on a notebook to be able to plot my training, but then more importantly, plot my loading if I'm taking something out, and to be able to see, you know, I've got some dates down the side here. I've just pulled out one line of my spreadsheet to be able to just show squat and then reps, 90 for 12, 95 for 12. There's a tempo in there we're going to get to in a second. Next date, squat, same movement. Next date, squat, same movement. Next day, squat, same movement. So we can see the loading over that period of time. And we're going to have a look at in these sessions around how we might structure these sort of programs. And the other thing that would be just off this page here would be the 24-hour response, which would mean that I would be able to be doing a movement or an exercise that you might have prescribed me, and then afterwards I could write down 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10, to be able to get a gauge of, again, am I pushing the envelope too much? Do I need to step back? That is how we can see the load response, plot our load response, which we are able to be in control of programming, but then also they can report the pain response there. I'm going to just stop sharing that a second and illustrate another way. Share screen, application window. That can work. Is this going to work? Come on. No, it doesn't seem to want to be able to share that. I'm just trying to share my Excel spreadsheet, Paul, just to illustrate how I would record my pain response of my elbows, for example, which I've also been working through in the last 6 months, but it doesn't want to share. So basically what I wanted to illustrate for you there, guys, is I had a medial elbow pain, and I had, again, we're going to see the principles of how we load manage to take out the compressive movements. But then when I was doing the exercises or the training on my elbow, I had a sets and reps of the exercise, so I'm getting stronger through it, and targeted movements at that elbow, but then also a pain response at the end to be able to see, am I okay? Is this level that I can keep working through, or do I need to go even further down the ladder? But again, that can be done by a notebook, it can be done via an Excel spreadsheet, but either way, if we are leaving it to memory, load management will become incredibly frustrating, because for your client, it becomes guesswork, and for you, it becomes guesswork. So everybody's guessing. So there is adjunctive therapies that we can be doing alongside tendinopathies that are going to be potentially helpful. There is a component of tendinopathy that seems to be inflammation based. So Pete Madaris will generally give anti-inflammatories for a couple of weeks, or recommendations for things like ibuprofen for being able to have an impact on the inflammatory component, but then other things like shockwave therapy, steroid injection, these should be really reserved for next second line after a really good crack at load management, which is what we're going to be looking at now. Being able to assess load tolerance. So when you go through the tests for compression and stretch shortening cycle, if some people will be just moderately load intolerant, which means that their pain will come in at around the 4, 5 out of 10 region, even with the highest loading tests. With these people, we can just take them one step down and we can load them, and we can really make that the emphasis of the program. For someone who is severely load intolerant, that's where we do those load management tests, the orthopedic tests on the shoulder, for example, we looked at there, and somebody flares, not just in the session, but their pain persists for days, even weeks afterwards. And for those people, we need to go right down the load management gradient. And we may go as far down as just doing isometric, so contraction without moving. And we need to load these people, but cautiously. If we load these people as if they haven't got a sensitivity issue, there's going to be a big barrier, and we're going to sensitize their alarm system up even more. And for some people who their pain is off the charts, then they're severely load intolerant to all tests, then we have to be looking at pain management first. And that's where the sensitivity stuff came in last week. Maybe there will be some co-management with other stuff that's going on psychosocially, but pain neuroscience education and so forth is probably where we're going to be starting with pain management for those before there, so that we can get them to the point where they can even begin to tolerate any loading. And here's some key papers from Achilles and tendinopathy, but just the main point here is that reiterating that pain has to be okay. Acceptable pain is not no pain. You will work with your patient, but maybe up to 4 or 5 is acceptable out of 10 and lower. This is the illustration that we use to be able to present the fact that there may be some adjunctive rehabilitation or passive stuff that is going to be this side of the metaphorical bridge towards the other side, which is where we're going to be having this sort of tubular effect like we talked about before. Function is going to be going up, and the general trend and trajectory over periods of time is towards self-management. And that's where being able to have education, so that's going to be a big part of you getting people on board of these things, and actually being able to turn up and do the loading, resistance training. That's going to be super important. Some things that are helpful when we are in loading is being able to use RPE, rate of perceived exertion, and that has been translated in something called reps in reserve, which is this key paper by Eric Helms in 2016, and I think they're building on that now. But ultimately, what that enables you to do is to adapt the intensity of an exercise each set. So if you can, I'm not going to have time to really go into it now, but you can get the paper. If people would like it, I could upload the paper onto Blackboard, but it's ultimately being able to have a weight, for example, 3 sets of 10, and it corresponds to the amount of reps that you would have left at failure, or you would stop at 5 reps of an exercise, and you would say that you have either 1 rep left, or you have 2 reps left, or you have 3 reps left, as to how far you stop short of failure. And obviously, working to 1 rep in reserve is a much higher intensity than 3 reps in reserve. But if you were working, for example, to 1 to 2 reps in reserve across 3 sets, it means that the weight could change to enable you to be able to work with that. Sam?
Hi, from looking at reps in reserve and RPE, they're both quite subjective. Is any one more kind of more specific than the other and accurate? I know it obviously depends on the person doing the exercise, but I didn't know if one gave you more accurate information than the other.
Yeah, it's a good question. And what this paper has basically done is quantified RPE, which is a subjective rating, which, believe it or not, is about as accurate as you'll get with a lot of tracking. But this is about translating that to strength training. And what the paper shows is that further down or closer down towards strength, which is going to be in your sort of 1 to 5 rep range, and what this graph shows you, in hypertrophy, you're looking at maybe sort of 6 to 12 rep range typically, and then your endurance further along here. You know, the further away from true strength you go, the less accurate you are. But Sam, if the caveat to this is that you have to be already experienced with resistance training for this to be accurate. So I would be able to take you into the gym, and I would be able to work with you for a period of time. Say you had a patellar tendinopathy, you had a sore knee. We would be able to. You would have enough experience if I was to give you 3 sets of 5 reps. That if I said to you, I want you to go to 2 reps in reserve, you would have, and what this paper shows is if you're experienced with strength training, you would be able to do that very accurately, do 5 reps, and you would only have 2 reps left. It's subjective, but it's based on that experience, and you will know that when you're strength training on a bench press, for example, when you've got 1 rep left. Go.
Yeah, no, that makes sense in terms of experience. So if you had a less experienced patient or client coming in, you would have to build up their experience before getting this kind of information from them by starting off with lower reps and making sure they're within that kind of safe zone.
Yeah, it's you know, you're asking really good questions there, and what the paper will talk about is that if someone has no experience with strength training, basically if we're working with somebody and we're playing that coach's role, we can be asking questions as we're working through. When you've done the set there, how many reps do you think you had left there? And you get people to start trying to think about these things. And if you really want to be able to test it, then you can do a 10 rep max test, and say, you know, you take someone through and ask them to stop when they've got. You can actually take them to the point where they will say, well, they've got 2 reps left, and you say, okay, well, let's go. Oh, hang on, you did 5. Oh, so that wasn't 2 reps in reserve. So you can use ways of being able to start build someone's vocabulary or experience through doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's useful for strength training, and it's something that I use with my training to be able to manipulate the intensity through from set to set. But again, it does have limitations with regards to someone who has not got experience with strength training. Now I'm going to play this video here now, because this is going to be the only place that we're going to cover it, but I know for a lot of you that tempo prescription is going to be something that you haven't done before. So I'm going to play this, and you'll see this through all the lectures after this as to where it comes in. Hopefully if you're doing stuff outside and away from class, it will also carry across to that as well. Tempo prescription, what's that all about?
If you're unfamiliar with tempo prescription, then this is going to be a brief primer to be able to make sense of how I might have written a training program or different phases of rehabilitation, because we can give a duration to each part of a movement that can be read by you to be able to tell you how much time to spend in each phase. Now, it will always have 4 numbers or letters, and it will work across like this. And I'm going to use an example of a bicep curl to be able to explain what each of the phases are. Well, the first one I will always write will be the eccentric phase, or the negative phase. Now, from a bicep curl, that would be this part of the movement here. Then it would be followed by an isometric portion where we change direction. Then it would be followed by a concentric portion or the positive phase, where we would come back to the top. And then it would be finished off with another isometric phase. Isometric meaning no movement. So if we were to put some time frames on a bicep curl, here's what a few variations might look like. So the first one I've got here is 4, 0, X, 1. Now for the numbers, they're going to be numbers of seconds. If I've written an X, that will mean up as fast as you can. And that will generally be in the concentric or the positive phase. Okay, so on a bicep curl, this is what 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. X, up as fast as you can. 1 second. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. X, 1, 4, 3, 2, 0, 1, 0. X, 1 would look like. 4 seconds down, 0 at the bottom, up as fast as we can, 1 second at the top. 3, 2, 1, 0, 0, X, 1. 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 3, 2, 1, 0, 1. Let's have a look what it might look like if we have 2, 0, X, 0. 2, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0. 3, 0, 3, 0. 3 on the eccentric. 3, 2, 1, 0. 3, 2, 1, 0. 3, 2, 1, 0. 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, and in some places we might see a little dash, which means that that part of the movement, so that concentric part of the movement isn't going to be included. Okay, so on this one we've got 8, 0, dash, 0. So we're going to get to the top position. I'm just going to take 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 0. Reset. Back to the top. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Reset. Back to the top. 2, 2, X, 0. Okay, same movement. 1, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, up. 2, 1, 0, 2, 1, up. We can apply a tempo prescription to any movement. And if you can interpret I'll always write first the eccentric or the negative part, then the isometric, then the positive, then the final isometric. So if you were to look at doing a few of those two, let's look at a different movement, let's look at a squat. So we'll take the first one, 4, 0, X, 1. So the negative is going to be 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, up as fast as we can, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, up as fast as we can, 1 second. Okay, let's look at 3, 0, 3, 0 on a squat. 3, 2, 1, 0, 3, 2, 1, 0. However much time is allocated to the movement, we try to spread equally throughout the range of that movement. And this is important because for different types of training, different tempos will be more appropriate than others. For example, in rehabilitation, if we have got an irritating knee, then we will go to what we call a heavy, slow resistance type tempo, which means that we will generally start with 3, 0, 3, 0. We become sensitive or irritated by high and fast movements. So jump in and we will start with a heavy, slow resistance tempo like this. Maybe we will progress when we can tolerate that to a 3, 0, X, 0. So just the same movement, we can manipulate and play with tempo by changing the variables in tempo through speed. In different types of training, we will want to develop the top and the bottom position. So maybe you can or can't do a pull-up. So we would want to be able to do, for example, a hold in the top position and then just the negative. So if we were to have this, that might look like 3, 0, concentric isn't there, and we have 7 seconds. So we're in a pull-up, for example. Imagine I'm holding onto rings or a bar. I'm going to hold onto that top position for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 3-second negative. 3, 2, 1 to the bottom of the chin. 0, reset. By however means get back to the top. 7 seconds. We can spend time in end ranges, and that's how we might like that in tempo prescription. But if you need to review this, this should enable you to be able to interpret some of the programming that I've written, because this is how we can make things a lot more challenging and equally a lot easier simply through manipulation of tempo.
So that's tempo prescription. That's something I'll put onto Blackboard. But that's really important to be able to understand that. And again, if that may be new to you, the negative, the positive, and the changes at each end need to be able to identify that for the different movements that you might be doing. So that's what I sort of set as a little task here, to try and apply and play with different tempos for a lateral, for a lat pull down, for a lunge, for a tricep extension, for a ring dip, any movement that you could think of. Sam, I think you came up and trained, and we were doing some tempo stuff on the rings. Can you remember that?
Yeah, on negatives.
Exactly. Being able to look at a movement pattern and then play and break down the tempo, really, really important skill set. And for reading a lot of the programs that I've written throughout and from this point onwards, that needs to be something that we are familiar with. Okay, so that's tempo. Let me just pull that out. Come on, computer, don't play me up now.
If you're unfamiliar with tempo prescription, then this...
Yeah. Cool. So this then leads me on to the key papers that are going to be guiding load programming throughout all of the programs that we're going to be doing. And this is going to be the Igor Sancho paper, which is looking at levels and applying levels to phases of rehabilitation. And you'll see here that they're based on acceptable pain on your provocative testing. So we need to know what those are for each test. And that then puts us into a category of loading. So level 1, pain under 3 out of 10 for the pain greater than 3 out of 10 on all the provocation tests. Then they're going to be doing isometric training in the range, in an area that they are able to do. We'll have a look in a second how they might do that. Level 2, as soon as possible, we need to be getting to isotonics. So we would then, you see a layering of isometrics, level 1 then plus level 2, which would be isotonic training, which is positive and concentric, and that could be up to 3 times a week. Level 3 is going to be level 1 plus level 2, and then the addition of some high and fast load, double leg jumps. Level 4 is level 1 plus level 2. Then the jumps are made more challenging because they go to single leg, and then we've got running, which is going to be a general return to plyometric loading through there, and that's going to be also independent. That's going to be bespoke to the sport or the type of running that would be, whether it's back to playing rugby or hockey, or whether it's back to being able to get to work, whatever that may be. But these phases, which you're going to need to become familiar with, are based on pain assessment that we've just gone through, and then that filters us into the level of loading that might be. So let's have a quick look at what that might entail, because this is for an Achilles loaded program. So we have isometrics, which is up to 3 times a day, 5 times 45 seconds. Okay, and that's at body weight 4 in terms of the position of loading it. Level 2 would be isotonics, which would be up to 3 times a week, which would be standard heel raises, seated heel raises, but then also being able to put in a balanced program. So hip abductions, hip extensions, and things that are not just the Achilles, but things that are going to be, the opposite side of the Achilles, to be able to balance it out. Or if we're talking about the upper limb, maybe we're talking about pushing, can we balance it as well with pulling? Level 3 is going to be isotonics 3 times a week, and then double leg jumps 3 times a week. So that would be the jump protocol, or the variable hop protocol, as you might see it in the literature, would be 3 times 60 double leg hops, 3 times 30 double leg hops with a stiff knee, which is going to really bias the Achilles, 3 times 5 double leg forward and back, 3 times 5 double leg onto a step. Once that comes under acceptable amount of pain, we're on to level 4 then, which is your isometrics, which you may or may not do, because we want to be getting to the isotonics. That's where the real magic is. And then single leg hop, so that's taking the intensity of the high and fast load up higher again. And now we've got a means of grading back in running, which is based on the envelope of function that someone was able to do prior to them having to load manage running, for example. And that is a framework that you will see coming back to as a baseline framework for all of the load management programs that I have created for the different limbs. Essential management will include progressive exercise to increase tolerance and function. That is something that we've looked at. Again, the type of exercise seems to be not entirely important, but we do have specific exercises that are going to target the patella more than the shoulder, for example. And load management, provocative movement. So what is the compressor and high and fast load in their daily life? Take that out. Education. So it may take some unraveling some beliefs and getting someone on board the fact that this is something that could take a while to be able to take effect. So this is what progressive exercise looks like. We want to find this start point, so we need to take the worst load test out of the battery that we do, and we use that as a marker for passing on through up to the next level. So for example, if single leg, stiff leg hopping gives an 8 out of 10 pain, we need to stop that stretch shortening cycles or jumping and single leg running until stiff leg, single leg hopping comes down to a 4 or a 5 out of 10. Okay, and this is what the trend of the movement progression will look like. Isometric, as soon as we can get to isotonic, and then when it's fluid load tolerant, we're going on to high and fast load. Some key points for isometrics is that they're not a panacea, but they can be helpful for a couple of reasons. They can give pain relief, and they can be that start point for where someone is able to get going. We can get people to be able to do a set maybe with us in clinic, and then be able to get them to do multiple sets then based on the guideline program that I introduced before, maybe once a day, maybe up to 3 times a day, sets of 30 to 45 seconds. Okay. You can keep it as a warm up through the rehab as we looked through the layers before. This is a wall sit for soleus, which is actually really intense when you keep your weight on the big toe rather than the outside of the little toe. Very effective isometric for the Achilles, especially if we don't have a gym. This is an example of how we might do it for hamstring. Yeah, I will try and full screen where I can. It's because I'm trying to play a Google document. Believe it or not, every time I do that, it's making it very, very jumpy. But we're going to be spending a session on hamstring, session on Achilles. The point I want to be able to illustrate there is it's an example of being able to load up the hamstring for, it could be for pain relief, or it could be for finding what the amount of load tolerance they are able to get going with. Here are some of the things that I've mentioned previously around some objective strength goals through heavy slow resistance, so 3030 for the Achilles. You know, being able to do seated calf raise with 1 to 1.5 times body weight, 6 reps. You know, that you can work out based off your own body weight. So if you're 100 kilos, that would be 6 reps heavy slow resistance with 140 to 150 kilos. Have a go at doing that. You'll realize that that is actually a very, very challenging goals, whether you're in rehab or not. And that becomes, these become goals that are from Pete Malliaris, that are based around his gym, but he has produced a lot of research around tendinopathy, and it says, you know, for example, with patella, so a leg extension of 40 to 60 kilos, that might be slightly different for the gym that you are working with. But these strength goals for the patella, for the hamstring, for the glutes in hip abduction, for patella, are really helpful goals for you to be able to be set in your rehabilitation with your clients. Okay, so that's in there. And here's an illustration of, I will make this big, the importance of doing single leg over 2 legs. Because when you take the non-injured leg out, this is my patella tendinopathy last year, it exposes the intramuscular coordinations of the nervous system that your other leg would otherwise take ownership of. So here is examples of the fasciculations in and around my leg to the isolated loading of the patella. This is all acceptable pain, Sam. So for me, under 4 to 5 out of 10. But I've had, you know, as you'll appreciate, I've had a patella tendinopathy for over a year now, so I've been living with 2 out of 10 knee pain the entire time. So being able to deal with a bit of discomfort, but actually what I find is that when I do heavy slow resistance with those, especially when I was sensitized, my knee would feel much better afterwards. It would actually give me an analgesia, and that's something that you'll see when working with patients and putting them through this as well, is if a lot of people will fear exercise, but if we could slow the intensity down so that they get a really controlled reps through a range that's not provocative, then they'll get blood to the area, and actually it can often feel good afterwards, which is something that people haven't had an awful lot of. I'm going to play some examples here of strength testing, because we want to be able to do some 6 rep max strength testing for these to be able to use as a marker to start with. I'm not going to have time to play them all because these lectures are very short. I'll do the
access to a leg extension machine that goes heavy enough to strength test you for 6 reps. That is going to be the preferred method for single leg quad strength testing. Okay, we're going to do it with a heavy slow resistance tempo, which means that we're going to be doing it for 3 seconds up and then 3 seconds down. It's a 6-second cycle with a tempo, and it's going to work to try and achieve what our true 6 rep max is. Okay, so it's going to look like this. You get yourself set up into the machine and get yourself set up to get those pads like you chair set to adjust the base. Okay, so the rate's going to be from about 90 degrees, not to really much further than that, but I want you to be able to then get the full range that you are able to. The top range of movement is too painful, then we just go as far as we can go. Then we're going to go 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up. 3, 1, 0, 3, 2, 1, 0. And if I'm able to maintain tempo, if I'm able to maintain the repetition, I would then rest for 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes to be able to then increase the weight and keep going until I get a 6 rep max for both legs.
Okay, so that's an example of strength testing the quadriceps. We want to be able to get an objective way of being able to measure strength. Manual muscle testing, whether you've been exposed to literature on that, I'll let you speak to Paul around the research around how the shortcomings of manual muscle testing, which is why we need to be able to do it objectively where possible, and that's where these and applying tempo and the range of movement become really important. This is a real turn the sound off there. This is an example of the bent leg calf raise of how we would work up. So there's how we would work up to be able to apply 1.4 times body weight. So my body weight at the moment is about 95 kilos. That there is 20, 40, 60, 80. That isn't even my body weight. So that gives you an idea. For me to be hitting what the research shows is a protective amount of strength in the Achilles, I would be having to have another 9,500, 104, another 2 blue plates on me there. That is really tough, okay? And the step here takes us into an extra amount of compression, maximum compression. In the Achilles is going to be, as we look at, is dorsiflexion. So if someone was not tolerant of full dorsiflexion at the moment, we wouldn't step, we would do it on the floor, and we go from side to side. How much pain with these reps within is that per each Achilles? Yeah, these Sam, were, I haven't got Achilles pain, so I can't treat myself clinically with pain here. I'm able to just go till I can't actually get the reps. Do in terms of the 1.8 times body weight. What do you mean there, mate?
Sorry, I was meant to say no. So you said that the loading is 1.8 times body weight for the safety.
1.4.
1.4. But is that
1.8?
is that per the Achilles, or is that them combined together?
That's per leg. So that's what, as I'm showing there, on single leg.
So if you were doing a double leg Achilles raise, you should be lifting 2.8.
Yeah, but what will happen there is if you've got an Achilles problem on one side, as I just showed you with the patella, your dominant side would take far more than 50%.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So that's how you objectively get onto single leg and be able to really drive up and challenge and change the tolerance of a single leg of the Achilles, and that we've got clear data around strength targets to set people, which we don't have in back and shoulder and neck rehab. To be able to say to someone, set this as a goal of 1.4. If you're working with me, Sam, and you set me, you say, look, you're struggling with 80 kilos on your leg there. Well, the research shows that, if I run into an Achilles problem for some reason, now I get a flare up, I've got about 6 to 8 months worth of training like a motherfucker to try and get that up to 140. So, it gives really motivating to be able to set that goal. How do you approach those whose work involves load, and do you advise sick leave, changing job responsibilities whilst you build up tolerance, or do you reduce? How do you advise sick leave, changing job responsibilities whilst you build up tolerance? How do you approach those? Yeah, I'll let Paul take that one. I want to just, conscious you guys are going to be leaving now in a second, so I do want to give you, a quick overview of what's in the rest of this presentation. Yeah, Paul, symptom modification, we've got an entire lecture on that. So I want to be able to just cover the overriding principles, because I won't be covering that again with these guys. How do you approach work involving loading? Do you advise sick leave, changing job responsibilities while you build up tolerance? All right, yeah. So basically, Poppy, with the examples you saw with the The shoulder assessment I did there before, you know, that we can't be specific with these tests. They don't tell us which structures involved, but they do tell us how that hurts there. So when we get into the shoulder, there will be something called the shoulder symptom modification procedure for being able to tolerate being overhead if they have to as part of their job. Okay, because we will be trying to say, you know, you need to load manage being overhead for a while, but if they're saying they have to, we've got to be able to try and adapt that for them. We've got an entire session around that for the shoulder. I'm in the middle of building it, but that's something that we will be spending some time on. Why has that stopped sharing? Screen share application screen. Here's a slide that you probably all want to take note of, because this is going to be like a gospel for you to be able to see guideline programming for the isometric, for endurance, for max strength and velocity, for sets, reps and intensity, rest periods, tempos. Okay, you will be able to have access to that online, but that's going to guide programming through different phases. Because it took us the whole session to get through step 1. Step 2 is load management. So that's where we have to be able to reduce and stop doing the provocative thing. If it's running, or if it's the high and fast load with the lower limb, you know, we will be having to try and reduce that by 50 or even 100%. If it's walking, that's difficult to just say, like, walk half speed. You know, Pete Malaris will say, you know, if you've got a Fitbit, etc., try and drop the total steps to 50%. Some way of stopping doing the provocative thing, and that's probably the single most important thing in load management in load management, which is basically what you have become irritated by, compression or high and fast load that's exceeded your envelope of function somewhere along the line. Stop doing that, and things will settle down, and we can gradually build up, generally through an enormous plethora of things. And I want to be able to just show you an example of the program that I've been doing around that recently, where this is Winter. She owns a jump rope company in Australia, and her post there, Bunny is back jumping. She's not been able to jump for about 6 months. She feared that she wouldn't be able to jump again, and you know, we did a Zoom call where she sent me her MRI scan. We normalized that. We talked about how she probably got outside of her envelope of function with high and fast load. Don't need surgery, don't need any of these things which she was concerned about having. Let's stop doing that. Sent her some heavy slow resistance around the patella and hamstring and calf to be doing for a period of time, and stopped the high and fast load. Okay, and this is her back jumping rope this week, and she's pretty big profile online, but I want to just show you here, people commenting, you know, did you have to have your meniscus cleaned up? And she is going to be sharing with her what she's been doing with me. And for you guys, ultimately the most important thing is that I stopped her doing high and fast load for a period of time, so it settled down so that she's able to get back doing it again. Screen share application, prone time, and load management. Okay, so they're going to have to wrap up very quickly here, so you guys have got an overview. The reality is 6 to 12 months is really the minimum time frame that we're looking at here, and what the load gradient looks like in terms of return to play would be hitting strength goals like 1.4 times body weight. There's a couple of similar ones on standing calf raise, and that would be when we then can return to running, then we can return to variable hopping, and then we can return to the competition around return to play. Some examples that Pete Malaris has here on tendons that was very persistent and failed a lot of previous rehabilitation, was this elite tennis player, 2 years of rehab, failed injection, shockwave, oral therapy. This is an ultrasound, and this is a big tear of the patella. And ultimately, what Pete Marlis was able, because he does ultrasound scans, is illustrate that he was able to get him back to playing tennis, but it took 12 months. And the big difference from what they'd had before was a massive increase in the total volume of resistance training. And the tendons did show signs of change on the ultrasound, but it took a couple of years to be able to see that. But we don't have to see changes on the scan to see changes in symptoms. That's really just an example that just to show that we can change connective tissue but it does take a long-term approach to loading. Some outcome measures here that we can be using, some resources for getting across things like stress physiology, things like the pain in under 5 minutes. And here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 papers that I'm building individual lectures on at the moment. For example, like the shoulder symptom modification procedure that we touched on there, Poppy, going through applying that Igor Sanchez paper to the Achilles, to the patella, to the hamstring, to the shoulder. So whistle stop, road run, but I've run over by 5 minutes for the next group already. I hope that was helpful. Send me any questions, and I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys next week if you guys are with me. Cheers. I got to run because I'm getting told off next week. Bye.